In this video, I'm going to be breaking down episode 11 of Attack on Titan Season 4, in which Eren's army of supporters begin to cause trouble on Paradis Island, and Marley strategize how they're going to get revenge. This video will break down what's going on with that, plus everything else that I thought was interesting, including Gabi and Falco's adventure, and whether the rumbling is going to happen or not. The politics surrounding the rumbling can get a bit confusing, so I tried to break it down as straightforwardly as possible in this video. Before we begin, be sure to hit that sub button as we are on the road to 250k, which would be a massive milestone, and I'd also appreciate if you dropped a like as it does help out the video. Okay, so episode 11 was called Deceiver, and the title is likely a reference to Zeke deceiving Marley, or Yelena possibly deceiving the military by having a secret meeting with Eren. That being said, the first true deception of the episode came in the opening scene, when Gabi pretended to have some kind of seizure, only to brutally assault the guard who came to check up on her. What Gabi did here was remove a brick from a nearby wall, and then wrap it up in the same jacket that she was wearing when she arrived. Gabi's brutality when attacking this guy was completely unhinged. Like, you didn't need to hit him 5 times, I'm sure even just twice would have knocked him out completely, but it was her belief that they were going to be killed. With the exception of Flock, I highly doubt anyone would have been on board with killing them, but as we already know, Gabi is a very paranoid individual. Back in Marley, Reiner wakes up after hearing Gabi and Falco's voices in a dream, and in all likelihood he was probably having a nightmare about the raid in Marley, because that's when both kids were crying out to him. Galliard offers Reiner a drink as he wonders where the warrior candidates are, and there's a couple things I want to point out here. Number one is that with Zeke now defecting to Paradis, Reiner is by default the new captain of the warriors, as he was previously vice captain before Eren did his thing. I just found this really interesting because it was established early this season that Reiner was the weakest candidate who was never even meant to be a warrior in the first place, so it's kind of funny that he's managed to stumble his way to the top. The second thing was that Porco had been drowning his sorrows in a bottle of wine, showing for the third time that Marley and wine might just be the best in the Attack on Titan universe. The anime then goes back to Gabi and Falco, who had been running so long that it was now the morning. As they take a breather, Gabi insists on still wearing her warrior candidate armband, despite the fact that it could easily identify them as Eldians from Marley. She's been conditioned to believe that Eldians on the island are intrinsically more evil than the good Eldians who live in Marley. We saw during the dinner at the Braun household that, these guys just talk about this all the time. Even when they're having dinner, Reiner's mother still made it a point to teach Gabi about how evil the Eldians on the island are. The armband symbolizes to her that she is different from those Eldians on the island, and therefore if she was to take it off, then it would almost be admitting that they are the same. That's what made this moment from Falco so savage, as he just straight up rips the thing off Gabi's arm. The two then have a brief altercation, but are interrupted by Kaya, who was the girl that had her life saved by Sasha 4 years ago. Ever since that day, she was taken in by Sasha's parents, and now lives on their family farm alongside other orphans who had nowhere else to go. During a morning walk, she happens to overhear these two arguing, and politely asks where they're from. Obviously, the warrior candidates couldn't tell the truth, but can we appreciate that in this moment, Gabi was prepared to bash another person's head in? Anyway, Kaya invites these two back to her family home, and there's just a lot to unpack from this moment onwards. The first issue is that this man is Sasha's father, this woman is Sasha's mother, and this crazy person is the one that killed Sasha, but neither of them know that. Gabi has no idea that this is the family of the person she murdered, and these guys have no reason to suspect that Gabi was the killer. As a result, we get this bizarre situation in which Sasha's parents accept the warrior candidates into their home, offering for them to stay as long as they need. This brings us to the next point, which is that in order to conceal their identities, Falco claimed that he and Gabi were siblings and that their names are Ben and Mia. That's right people, Falco just brother zoned himself without even realizing it. Throughout this whole scene, we saw what are possibly the first steps towards Gabi realizing that all Eldians are the same regardless of where they're born. Upon entering the house, Gabi realizes that Sasha's father has an accent that she's heard before in Marley. That accent is sort of like a countryside twang that is typical for people in this region, and Sasha actually had that same accent, but she tried to hide it during her time in the Scouts. The reason this is important is because Gabi clearly knows people back home with this same accent, so the fact it's coming from someone who's supposed to be a devil, it's something that humanizes the Eldians on Paradis and makes them seem less like monsters and more like the regular Eldians that Gabi herself knows. The next step that Gabi took towards enlightenment was when she decided to eat the food that was made by Sasha's mother, after previously saying that she would never eat with devils. Her Marleyan programming was already in full effect, as we saw when she slapped away Sasha's mother's hand, so clearly it would have taken a lot for her to actually, eat food made by an Eldian from Paradis, and not only do that, but eat it alongside them as well. At this same time, Ambassador Kiyomi had touched down on Paradis Island, and although she appeared in the flashback last week, this is her first appearance in the present day since the declaration of war. Given what Eren just did, it is a big risk for her to come to the island physically, however she does have a good reason for doing so. For the past 3 years, the nation of Historia has had an alliance with Paradis and have been using the Iceburst Stone to develop new technology. One of their new creations is this flying boat that requires the Iceburst Stone to work, and Kiyomi intends to use it so she can observe the partial rumbling of the earth. Considering that Eren and Zeke have been separated, you might be confused as to whether Paradis is or isn't planning to do a rumbling, so I'm going to break down the whole situation based off current information. To begin, a rumbling was always on the cards for Paradis from day one, but the flashbacks made it clear that they wanted to explore other alternatives before they had to use it. Over the years, Paradis tried different ways of making peace with other nations, but none of those worked, otherwise we wouldn't be where we are. By Eren attacking Marley in the present day, a partial rumbling of the earth is now necessary because the rest of the world is going to attack them pretty soon. The problem for the military is that although they know a rumbling is necessary, they don't trust Eren or Zeke to do it because if these two make contact, then a lot of things can happen. If Eren and Zeke make contact, then in theory, Eren has control over every alien in the world. He could manipulate their memories, he could turn them into titans, he could change their physiology, he can literally do whatever he wants, so they don't trust him to be the one to do it. That's why Eren and Zeke are currently separated, but the military is still preparing for the rumbling to happen. We know this because in this episode, Kiyomi has arrived to observe the rumbling in her flying boat, and more importantly, thanks to Reeves, we know that a forced evacuation of Shiganshina is currently underway. Shiganshina is one of the outermost parts of the wall, so if a partial rumbling was to happen, then it makes sense to start there. Residents are likely being evacuated because if a partial rumbling is to start, then it's possible that homes could be destroyed by falling debris or even the wall titans themselves. Therefore, with all this evidence that the military is getting ready to rumble, how are they going to make that happen if they don't trust Eren? The truth is that we don't know for sure at this stage, but Armin mentioned in the last episode that one option is to feed Eren to someone they can trust, and in theory that person could then activate the rumbling instead. That's pretty much all there is to it at this moment, so I hope that cleared up most of the rumbling situation, but without further ado, let's move on to Hanji being confronted by this mob at military headquarters. Most of this mob are here for one reason only, and that is to ensure the freedom of Eren Yaeger, and it's important to note that the military have not told the population that Eren was arrested. To fight back against this lack of information, Flock and a few of the new recruits have been spreading rumors among the population to rally up support for Eren's freedom. The people in the crowd can't understand why their hero is being imprisoned by the military, and Hanji wasn't exactly giving any answers that would put them at ease. This plan from Flock was really smart because if support for Eren continues to spread, then it will become more and more difficult for the military to justify keeping him in jail. It would also be more difficult for them to justify someone eating Eren because if the population perceives Eren as a hero, then how are you going to feed him to some random soldier? Like, it just doesn't make sense. Flock tells Hanji to her face that not only should Eren be freed, but he should also lead the new Eldian Empire. Although, someone should remind him that Eren does only have 4 years left to live, so, even if he is the new leader, he won't be able to lead for very long. Hanji takes a tough stance and has them all sent to prison for leaking information, but I gotta say it's fascinating that Eren has such a level of support that people are happily willing to do jail time to support him. Whilst Flock and the recruits are led away, Hanji remembers the warning that Sanez gave her last season. At that time, Hanji was in a similar position to what Flock is right now, in that she was fighting against the establishment to forcibly make political change. Sanez was tortured by both Hanji and Levi, and was eventually tricked into sharing information that led to Historia taking the throne. The reason she remembers what Sanez said here is because he warned her that no matter who's in charge, someone is always destined to play the role of the establishment and the role of the rebel. Back then, Hanji was the rebel, but now in the present day, she's one of the main people in charge and has to deal with rebels like Flock. Also, by Hanji refusing to tell the people information about Eren's imprisonment, she's basically doing exactly what characters like Sanez used to do, which is that they say they're protecting the people by keeping them in the dark about important issues that affect them. Anyway, down in the prison cells we got an awesome throwback to a character we've literally not seen for years, and that is Louise. In Season 1, after Wall Rose was breached, Titans began pouring into Trost, with many citizens trying to escape. Louise and her mother were among the evacuees, but their escape path was blocked by Demo Reeves, who at the time was the head of the Reeves Company. A fast abnormal Titan then began approaching them, and if it wasn't for Mikasa, everyone likely would have died, but she managed to breeze past the other scouts and just kill this thing with almost no effort. She then threatened to kill Reeves for endangering the citizens, and this naturally convinced him to move the wagon. This was definitely an iconic Mikasa moment, and in the eyes of a young Louise, I think it's fair to say that Mikasa became her hero. All these years later, Louise is now a new recruit in the Survey Corps, and part of the reason she joined was to get slightly closer to Mikasa. Like Flock, she's of the belief that Eren should be freed because the power of the rumbling ensures Eldia's survival. As Mikasa leaves, Louise gives her a nice salute, which was her paying respects to when Mikasa gave her that salute when she was a child. For some currently unknown reason, Mikasa's head painfully begins to throb as her mind flashes back to when Eren saved her from those kidnappers. This memory was triggered by what Louise had said during their conversation, but it's not the first time that this has happened to Mikasa. Way back in episode 2 of Attack on Titan, the Titans were causing chaos in Shiganshina, and Mikasa's head began to throb as she remembered what happened to her parents. For Mikasa, something about traumatic events causes this reaction in her brain, though currently we have no idea why. The anime then switches over to Yelena, who is under house arrest like the rest of the Marleyan volunteers. For those that missed my last review, the volunteers are currently being restrained because the military doesn't believe that Zeke is on their side, and they think that he's secretly plotting something. Because the volunteers are loyal to Zeke, it was necessary to separate them once he arrived on the island so that they can't communicate with each other or with him. Pixis begins to grill Yelena, as the entire time she's been on the island, she's tried to make herself appear squeaky clean. Pixis notes that many months ago, before Eren infiltrated Marley, Yelena had Flock assigned to her as a guard, and now he's in jail for trying to build up support for Eren among the population. Remember how when Yelena first appeared, she commented how excited she was to finally see Eren, and then in one of the other flashbacks, she tried to properly meet him but Levi got in the way. Whatever Yelena is thinking, she's clearly a big fan of Eren and obviously a big fan of Zeke as well, so there's something going on and it's just very unclear what. Pixis states that the place Yelena was staying was not that far away from Eren's home, meaning it's possible that with the help of Flock, Eren and Yelena had a secret meeting. If Flock thought it was beneficial for Eren to meet Yelena, then yeah, of course he would let that happen, so I guess we'll find out the truth next week. Now, back in the stables, Gabi and Falco were working as farmhands, and even this horse can tell that Gabi is bad vibes. Most of the scene was pretty self-explanatory, but we did get this moment when Gabi asked Falco why he's not more angry with Zeke, and the true reason is that he's not really reacting to Zeke's betrayal because Falco himself feels incredibly guilty for the part that he played. Everything that transpired would not have happened if Falco didn't deliver those letters for Eren, so he doesn't feel quite right in being totally angry with Zeke when he himself is at fault. After this moment when they're taking a break, Kaya makes it clear that she knew they were from Marley the entire time, but chose not to say anything because unlike a certain someone, Kaya doesn't judge a person based on where they're from. For the remainder of the episode, Gabi's Marleyan brainwashing was working at nearly 100%, as she kept trying to justify everything bad that's happened to both Kaya and the other orphans who live on the farm. Her logic was that because of the atrocities committed by the Eldians, present-day Eldians deserve anything bad that happens to them. Of course that logic doesn't quite check out, but the thing that really amazed me was that Gabi was so insensitive that she would even say these things on the spot where Kaya's mother was literally eaten by a Titan. Why does Falco like this girl again? Like, what redeeming quality does Gabi have that makes him so in love with her, when he's clearly the only sane one among the two of them? In fact, a few episodes ago, Falco tried to tell Gabi that the attack on Marley was because Marley attacked Paradis first, and Gabi replied saying something like, "Did you see it?" So I guess this is her literally seeing it, like this is what Marley did. So in that sense, it's quite poetic that she's here. The post-credit scene for this episode occurs in Marley, and just before you start freaking out, not every episode has a post-credit scene, so don't go back looking at the previous episodes. I think this is only the second one to have one, maybe the third. But anyway, the Marleyan warriors finally realize that Zeke has betrayed them, and there are a few things that gave him away. For example, there is Marleyan technology integrated into the scouts' equipment, and because Peak knows that Yelena was sent to Paradis a few years ago, it's kind of obvious that Zeke was the one who organized everything. Magath also elaborates that Zeke's full remains were not found. From the perspective of the Marleyans, they thought that there would be more stuff in the Beast Titan, but really it was just his limbs. All the warriors take the news differently, with Porco being the most emotional as usual, but Colt, who was meant to be the next Beast Titan, is also quite concerned, but not as much as you might expect. That's because Colt's main priority is getting Falco back home, which can only be done once Marley decide to launch their counterattack on Paradis. Magath's idea is to wait 6 months before they attack the island, which gets a big reaction out of Colt because, that's way too long, but Magath's reasoning is pretty sound. Magath wants to give other countries around the world enough time to prepare, and by doing this they can all attack the island simultaneously. If that was to happen, Paradis would not stand a chance. The only way they would survive is if they had already activated the rumbling. Otherwise, there's just nothing that would save them from the entire world attacking them at once. That said, Reiner argues that instead of waiting, they should launch a surprise attack on the island straight away, as by doing that, Zeke and the rest of the people on the island would be in no way prepared. No one on Paradis is expecting Marley to attack so soon, especially after Armin destroyed a chunk of their army. So by launching a quick attack, they can stop whatever Zeke is planning to do. With that said, that was my breakdown for episode 11 of Attack on Titan Season 4. As usual, I'd appreciate if you dropped a like if you like this one, and let me know in the comments what you thought of the episode. Until the next one, peace out.